The waitress defended a frightened little girl from being thrown out of the restaurant and paid for it with her job. What she didn't know was that the child she'd just stood up for was Sofia Serrano, daughter of Lucian Serrano, the man whose name alone could silence an entire room. That night, Clara Williams thought she'd lost everything. But by morning, when a convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside her small apartment and a man in a dark coat knocked on her door, she'd realized the truth. The world she'd stepped into didn't forgive. The story doesn't end here. Subscribe to Mafia Soul to see what happened next, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. The lunch rush at Bellamy's Bistro hit like a tidal wave every noon. An elegant storm of clinking cutlery, expensive laughter, and whispered deals that could change the skyline of the city. The air always smelled of butter and ambition. Clara Williams weaved through it all, one arm balancing a tray stacked with plates, the other gripping a pitcher of water so cold it numbed her fingers. Her smile was mechanical, her steps precise. She couldn't afford mistakes, not when every paycheck was already carved into rent, hospital bills, and late fees. She'd been at Bellamy's for 14 months, long enough to know every regular's order by memory and every manager's temper by tone. Her degree in economics, framed on the wall of her one-room apartment, hadn't bought her a career. Just irony. She could analyze markets, but couldn't escape her overdraft. That afternoon began like any other, until she noticed the little girl. Table 12. The corner booth usually reserved for the kind of clients who never said please. The girl couldn't have been more than 10. Her dark hair was brushed perfectly, but her dress, a navy blue one that probably cost more than Clara made in 2 weeks, was wrinkled at the cuffs. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the empty seat across from her, like she was waiting for someone important. There was something heartbreaking about that stillness. Something too careful for a child. Clara hesitated before approaching. "Hey there," she said softly, trying not to startle her. "Are you waiting for someone?" The girl nodded once. "That's okay. Would you like some water while you wait?" Another nod. No words. Just wide, dark eyes that carried the kind of silence that made Clara's throat tighten. She poured the water carefully, offering a small smile. "There you go, sweetheart." She was about to walk away when she heard it. The sharp click of expensive shoes on tile. Darren Hale, the floor manager. A man with a suit too tight for his ego and a personality that smelled faintly of superiority and cologne. "Excuse me," he called, loud enough for half the room to hear. "What is this?" Clara blinked. "What do you mean?" He gestured at the girl like she was a problem on the menu. "This table is reserved for paying guests, not lost children." The diners turned their heads, the way people always do when something uncomfortable happens, but no one said a word. The girl's hands twisted together. Clara's chest burned. "She's clearly waiting for her parent, sir." Darren's lips tightened. "And you're clearly overstepping, Williams. Move aside." "No," the word slipped out before she could stop it. "She's not hurting anyone. She's just waiting." The color rose in his face. "Do you know who eats here? What this table costs? We can't have random kids wandering in off the street." She didn't wander in. Clara's voice shook, but her eyes didn't. "Look at her clothes. She belongs here." "I don't care if she's wearing a crown," Darren hissed. "She's unaccompanied, and that's a liability. Step aside." The air thinned. Even the music from the corner piano faltered. Clara stood her ground. "You're embarrassing yourself, Darren." He took a step forward. "That's it. You're done here. Get out of my sight before." A voice cut through the room. Low, steady, dangerous. "Before what, Mr. Hale?" Every sound died. A man stood at the entrance, framed by daylight and shadow. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored like armor. His presence didn't just command attention, it demanded silence. He walked toward them slowly, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the quiet. The air felt charged, as if the walls themselves knew who he was. Lucian Serrano. The name wasn't spoken, but everyone knew it. The kind of man who built empires in whispers and buried his enemies without raising his voice. Darren stumbled over his words. Mr. Serrano, I didn't realize." Lucian's gaze flicked toward him, and Darren went pale. But then Lucian looked past him, to the little girl. The child had left her seat, her small hands clinging to Clara's apron. Lucian's jaw tightened. His voice dropped to a quiet that was somehow louder than any shout. Who raised their voice at my daughter? No one answered. The silence was absolute. Clara's pulse pounded in her ears. She could feel every eye in the room on her, waiting to see what she'd do, whether she'd crumble or speak. But she didn't move, didn't speak. Lucian's gaze shifted to her, unreadable. For a second, she thought she saw something flicker behind those eyes. Recognition, curiosity, maybe even gratitude. But it was gone as quickly as it came. The manager swallowed hard. Sir, Aishi. Lucian lifted a hand. Enough. He turned slightly toward Clara, studying her in silence. And she realized he wasn't looking at her like a waitress. He was measuring her. For courage, for intent, for truth. And in that moment, Clara knew two things. She was going to lose her job, and she had just met the most dangerous man in the city. That night, she'd walk home with a cardboard box and an ache in her chest she couldn't name. But by sunrise, a black car would be waiting outside her apartment, and the man who stepped out would not be there to threaten her. He'd come to make her an offer she couldn't refuse. The city didn't sleep, but Clara did her best to hide from it. The rain had started around midnight, a soft, unending drizzle that made the streetlights look like they were weeping. From her window, the world blurred into streaks of gold and gray. On the kitchen counter sat a cardboard box, her life at Bellamy's packed into 12 sad inches. Her name tag, 2 pins that didn't work, and the photo of her mother that had stayed taped to her locker. The rest of her things were memories she didn't want to carry. She'd walked out of the restaurant in silence. Darren hadn't even waited for Lucian Serrano to leave before firing her. You're done here, he'd hissed, his voice trembling between anger and fear. The other waitresses had looked away, pretending to wipe tables. No one wanted to be seen defending her. No one wanted to be next. Now, hours later, the confrontation played on a loop in her head. The look in the little girl's eyes, the weight of Lucian's stare, the way the room had frozen around her. It didn't feel brave anymore. It felt foolish. She dropped onto her worn-out couch, hugging her knees. The silence in her apartment was heavy, broken only by the hum of the fridge and the occasional sound of water dripping from a leak she still hadn't fixed. She needed this job. She needed that paycheck. Her mother's hospital bills sat in a stack on the coffee table, white envelopes with red warnings stamped across them. Final notice. Past due. She'd been doing everything right. Extra shifts, fewer meals, no heat some nights. But it was never enough. She pressed a palm against her chest, feeling the dull ache of exhaustion. Her mother had always said, do the right thing, even when it hurts. Clara had believed that once. But right now, all it had done was get her fired. She reached for her phone. Maybe someone from Bellamy's would text her. Maybe someone had seen what really happened. Nothing. Her screen lit up only with a new email, Bellamy's Human Resources. The subject line was short, sharp, and final. Employment termination and conduct report. She opened it, her stomach twisting. Following the incident on Thursday afternoon, management has deemed your behavior insubordinate and unprofessional. You are not eligible for rehire or recommendation within any Bellamy Group properties. A blacklist. Not just fired. Erased. Her chest went hollow. That was it. Every restaurant tied to Bellamy's, every luxury bistro or fine dining spot in the city was now off limits. She'd been working toward a promotion to floor supervisor, hoping to save enough for her mother's treatment in St. Bridget's private ward. Now, she couldn't even get a hostess shift in a corner cafe. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from her landlord. Rent due tomorrow. No extensions. She leaned her head back against the couch and closed her eyes. She could still hear the girl's voice, or rather, the absence of it. The way she'd clung to her apron, silent but trusting. Was she safe now? Was she even real? The scene had felt like a dream, like something too strange to belong to her world. And then there was him. Lucian Serrano. His voice replayed in her head. Who raised their voice at my daughter? The kind of voice that didn't ask questions. It delivered consequences. What kind of man inspired that much fear with a whisper? And what kind of father let his daughter sit alone in a restaurant like that? Clara pushed the thought away. The last thing she needed was to think about him. He belonged to another universe, one made of power, not survival. She stood and began cleaning just to stay busy, stacking bills, washing a dish that was already clean, folding a blanket. Her hands trembled as she moved. At some point, the rain stopped. The city fell into that eerie quiet that happens just before dawn. She sat on the edge of her bed, watching the faint light creep between the blinds. Her body was exhausted, but her mind refused to rest. She thought about her mother's voice again, soft and fading in the hospital room. "You have your father's stubborn heart, Clara. Don't let the world break it." She'd promised she wouldn't. But tonight, the world had come close. Somewhere between the tick of the clock and the faint rumble of the first morning bus, she must have drifted into a restless half-sleep. That's when the knock came. Sharp. 3 times. Her eyes flew open. Another knock. Firm, deliberate. Not the kind of knock that belonged to a neighbor or a delivery man. Heart hammering, Clara grabbed her robe and moved to the door. Through the peephole, she saw nothing but black. Suits, maybe, or shadows. A man's voice, calm and deep, came through the door. "Miss Williams? Mr. Serrano sent me. He'd like to speak with you." Her hand froze on the doorknob. Lucian Serrano. The man whose presence could stop time. The man whose daughter she'd defended. Fear crawled up her spine, but curiosity pressed harder. She turned the lock, slowly opened the door, and there, against the gray morning light, stood a man in a dark coat, his expression unreadable. Behind him, a sleek black car idled quietly at the curb. "Please," he said, stepping back. "Mr. Serrano is waiting." The words hung in the air like a promise or a warning. Clara swallowed hard, grabbed her coat, and stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the world still smelled of thunder. And somewhere beyond the clouds, the life she'd known was already gone. The man at her door introduced himself as Elias Vance, voice level, posture precise, someone used to giving orders and having them followed. The morning light behind him turned his silhouette into something almost unreal. "Miss Williams," he said, extending a sealed black envelope. "Mr. Serrano asked me to deliver this personally." Her name was written across the front in silver ink, elegant, deliberate. She hesitated before taking it, half expecting it to burn her fingers. Inside was a single card, heavy paper embossed with the Serrano Holdings crest. Below it, in clean script, "Your courage did not go unnoticed. Report to Serrano Holdings at 9 a.m. sharp. Do not refuse." There was no signature, but it didn't need one. Clara looked up. Is this some kind of joke? Elias's expression didn't change. Mr. Serrano isn't known for jokes. She almost laughed. Was this how it started for people who went missing? A polite man at the door and a letter that didn't ask, only commanded? But behind the fear, something deeper stirred, curiosity, maybe even hope. Lucian Serrano could have destroyed her career with a single phone call. Instead, he'd sent for her. "Do I have a choice?" she asked quietly. Elias's eyes softened, but only slightly. "You always have a choice, Miss Williams. Just not always the same consequences." By the time she reached Serrano Holdings, her nerves were frayed thin. The car Elias had sent, a black sedan with tinted windows, moved through the city like a shadow. Downtown rose ahead, all steel and mirrored glass, the kind of skyline she used to admire on her way to work. She'd never imagined stepping inside one of its towers. The Serrano building dominated the block, 50 floors of polished ambition. Guards at the entrance nodded them through without a word. Even the marble in the lobby seemed to whisper money. Clara followed Elias across the gleaming floor, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. Every person they passed looked sharp, expensive, and busy. People who probably never had to count change before paying rent. When the elevator doors slid open at the top floor, the contrast was almost disorienting. Gone was the corporate bustle. The space here was quiet, nearly sacred. The walls were lined with dark wood and black and white photographs, men in suits, moments in history where power was negotiated behind closed doors. Elias gestured to a pair of glass doors at the end of the hall. "He's waiting for you." Her pulse quickened. She pushed the doors open. The office was vast, but somehow solemn. A wall of glass overlooked the river, light spilling across the floor in sharp lines. Behind an oak desk sat Lucian Serrano, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a faint shadow of fatigue under his eyes. He didn't look up immediately. He was reading a file, pen poised in his hand like it weighed more than gold. When he finally glanced up, his gaze held her in place. The same unreadable calm, but something else, too, curiosity. "Miss Williams," he said simply. "Sit." She obeyed before realizing it. Lucian set the pen down, folding his hands. "Do you know why you're here?" Clara swallowed. "I assume it has something to do with yesterday." His mouth curved, just barely. "It does." He leaned back slightly, studying her. "You stood up for a child who wasn't yours. Most people wouldn't risk a paycheck for a stranger." "I didn't think about it," she admitted. "That's what makes it remarkable." She frowned. "Is this your way of offering me my job back?" Lucian's eyes flicked toward the window. "You're not going back to Bellamy's." There was a pause so long she could hear her heartbeat. He rose from the chair, moving to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "My daughter, Sophia," he said, voice lower now. "She hasn't spoken in nearly a year. Not since her mother's death." Clara froze. The pieces began to fit together. The silence, the fear in the little girl's eyes. Lucian turned to face her. "But after what happened yesterday," she said her first words. He let the weight of that hang before adding. "She said, she protected me." Clara's breath caught. She spoke. He nodded once. "You managed what therapists and specialists could not. Which brings me to why you're here." He walked back to his desk, retrieved a folder, and placed it in front of her. Inside were papers, confidential agreements, salary offers, non-disclosure clauses. The kind of documents that didn't belong in a waitress's world. "I want you to come work for me," he said. "Not in one of my companies. In my home." Her throat went dry. "Your home." Sophia needs stability. A presence she trusts. You'll be her caregiver and companion. She blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. "Mr. Serrano, I'm not a nanny. I don't even." "I'm aware of what you're not," he interrupted softly. "I'm also aware that my daughter spoke because of you. So unless you have a better explanation for that, I'd say you're qualified." Clara looked down at the papers. The salary printed at the bottom made her breath hitch. It was more than she'd earned in 3 years at Bellamy's. Still, something in her resisted. "Why me? You don't even know me." Lucian's gaze darkened, but not with anger. "You're wrong, Miss Williams. I know exactly who you are. I've read your records, your education, your mother's medical file. You fight when most people fold." Her hands trembled against the folder. "So this is pity?" He shook his head. "No, this is necessity." The words hung between them, heavy and irreversible. Clara exhaled slowly. The city skyline glared behind him, cold and bright. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that if she accepted this, nothing in her life would ever be the same. Lucian stepped closer, close enough for her to catch the faint scent of rain and tobacco. "So," he said, eyes steady on hers, "do we have an agreement?" Clara hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes, Mr. Serrano." His expression didn't change, but something softened at the edges. "Good," he said. "Then pack your things. You start tonight." The Serrano estate sat on the northern edge of the city, a fortress disguised as a home. The drive up the long, tree-lined path felt endless, the kind of silence that came from wealth, or the need to hide it. Iron gates opened only after Elias spoke into a coded intercom, and Clara felt the air shift as they rolled through. It wasn't just a house. It was a world with walls. The mansion itself was a masterpiece of dark stone and glass, sprawling and symmetrical, lit only by the golden glow of lanterns that lined the steps. Security cameras tilted quietly on the corners, and men in tailored suits patrolled with the stillness of statues. Clara had never seen guards this disciplined outside of a movie. When the car stopped, Elias opened her door. "Don't wander without clearance," he said simply, his tone polite but firm. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and something faintly sweet, expensive, subtle, controlled. Marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, reflecting a chandelier large enough to drown in. Every corner of the place whispered order and power. She followed Elias down a long hall lined with portraits, serious men with Serrano eyes, women who looked regal and untouchable. Clara didn't need introductions to know this family had ruled long before the city ever knew its name. At the end of the corridor stood a grand set of doors, carved with vines and wings. Elias stopped. "This is the East Wing. Your quarters are here. Sophia's are next door." He handed her a key card and an access tag. "Security runs 24 hours. Don't be alarmed if you see men outside your door at night. It's standard." "Standard," she echoed. "For what?" Elias gave a faint, unreadable smile. "For being a Serrano." The first time Clara saw Sophia again, the girl was sitting by the window of her room, knees drawn to her chest, staring out into the misty gardens below. The room looked like something out of a storybook: pale drapes, a dollhouse the size of a dresser, bookshelves stacked with untouched toys. Everything perfect, except the child. Sophia didn't turn when Clara entered. Didn't blink. "Hi," Clara said softly, setting her bag down. "I brought you something." She held up a sketch pad and a box of colored pencils. "They're not fancy, but I thought you might like to draw." No answer. Just the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. Clara sat in the armchair across from her, pretending not to notice the silence pressing between them. "You know," she said, flipping open the sketch pad, "when I was your age, I used to draw my mom's kitchen. It was small, but I'd always make it look bigger than it was." She said it made her smile. Still nothing. But after a few moments, Sophia turned her head slightly, just enough for Clara to see the shimmer of curiosity in her eyes. "You don't have to talk," Clara said gently. "I'm good at quiet too." She placed the sketch pad on the low table and left it there. When she stood to leave, Sophia's small hand darted out, resting on the edge of the table, hesitant but deliberate. Clara smiled. "You can keep it. I'll be next door if you need me." By the end of the first week, something had changed. The silence still lived in the house, but now it moved differently. Sophia started joining Clara for breakfast, sitting close enough to brush her sleeve. She still didn't speak, but she pointed when she wanted jam instead of butter, or when she wanted to walk in the garden instead of staying in her room. It wasn't much, but it was progress. And Clara learned that in this house, even small progress felt monumental. She also learned how watched she was. Cameras in the halls, quiet whispers between staff. The maid stopped talking when she entered a room. The chef, a lean man named Vince Corelli, always smiled too tightly. One afternoon, as she passed through the main corridor, she overheard two housekeepers whispering behind a door. "She's the one, the waitress," one murmured. "Boss brought her here himself. You think she's..." "She'll. If Anton hears you." The name caught her attention. Anton Malrek. She'd heard it once before, from Elias, in passing. Lucian's consigliere. Later that evening, she met him. He was in the library, tall, slick-haired, his smile polished like the marble floors. His handshake lingered too long, his eyes sharp with assessment. "So you're the miracle worker," he said, pouring himself a drink. "The one who made our little Sophia speak." Clara stiffened. "She hasn't spoken to me." "Ah," Anton replied, swirling his glass. "But she will. The boss believes it. And when Lucian believes something," he smiled thinly, "the rest of us adapt." Something about his tone made her skin crawl. There was respect there, yes, but also resentment. As she turned to leave, Anton called after her, voice casual but edged. "Be careful, Miss Williams. The Serrano house remembers everything, kindness included." She didn't answer, but she noticed how the lights seemed to flicker when she stepped into the hall, how the cameras shifted to follow her. Back in her room, she found the sketch pad on her pillow. A single drawing on the first page, Sophia's careful lines in blue pencil. It was the garden, the one outside the window, and standing near the gate, barely visible, was a tall figure drawn in gray. No face, just a shadow. Clara stared at it for a long time. Then she closed the sketch pad, her pulse heavy in her throat. Something inside this house was broken, and for reasons she didn't yet understand, it had begun to notice her. The Serrano mansion taught Clara two things quickly. Nothing inside those walls happened by accident, and silence didn't always mean safety. Days fell into a rhythm, structured, watchful. breakfast with Sophia, lessons in the garden, quiet dinners where Lucian appeared only long enough to check his daughter's progress before disappearing again behind closed doors. To anyone looking in, the arrangement seemed peaceful. But peace in the Serrano house was never still. It hummed beneath the surface like a storm waiting to break. Clara began to notice details. Conversations that stopped when she entered a room. The way Anton Malrek's car arrived long after midnight, its headlights briefly slicing across her window before vanishing into the garage. She didn't want to be suspicious, but something in her gut said this house wasn't built on money alone. One night, while returning from the library, she heard voices drifting from Lucian's study. The door was slightly open, the lights low. She froze in the hallway. Anton's voice, smooth, practiced, but sharper now, slid through the crack. You can tell Lucian whatever you want, but the numbers don't lie. If he knew how much was bleeding from those offshore accounts, he'd burn this place to the ground. Another voice answered, lower, nervous. Clara recognized it as the family's lawyer, Mr. DeLuca. You're moving millions, Anton. If he finds out. He won't, Anton cut in. Serrano's too busy playing father. The girl's softening him. And when he's distracted enough, the Valetti deal will close. Clara's heart lurched. Valetti. She'd heard that name whispered by the guards before, Lucian's rival family. She reached for her phone, hit record, and edged closer. Every word sounded like a trap waiting to spring. And the trust fund? DeLuca asked quietly. Sophia's? It'll transfer automatically once I trigger the clause. Lucian signs everything under emotional pressure. He won't even know it's gone until the ink dries. Clara's hand trembled. They were stealing from Sophia. A floorboard creaked under her shoe. The conversation stopped. For a breath, no one moved. Then Anton's voice turned sharp. Who's there? Clara backed away, pulse hammering, phone still recording. She ducked into a side hallway just as the study door swung open. Footsteps followed, measured, unhurried, predatory. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath. Anton's shadow slid across the floor, stretching long under the light. Hello, he called softly, a mocking lilt in his voice. You know, curiosity kills more than cats in this house. Her fingers clenched around the phone. Another step. And then, mercifully, a distant sound broke the silence. Sophia's voice echoing faintly from upstairs. Anton paused, then exhaled a short laugh. Children shouldn't wander after midnight, he muttered, turning away. Only when his footsteps faded did Clara move, heart still thundering. She slipped into her room, locked the door, and collapsed against it. The recording was still running. She played it back, Anton's words clear, damning. Her reflection in the darkened window looked like someone she barely recognized. Eyes wide, jaw tight, caught between fear and fury. She had proof. But proof against a man like Anton was a death sentence if found out. The next morning, she tried to act normal. Sophia was already at the table, arranging sugar packets into neat rows. Her face was calmer than usual, less guarded. Good morning, Clara said, setting down breakfast. We're having pancakes today. Chef Vince almost smiled when he made them. A tiny, almost invisible smile flickered on Sophia's lips. It was the first time Clara had seen one. They ate in silence until a sound from the hallway, a door slamming, made Sophia flinch violently. The sugar packets scattered. Her eyes went wide, glassy with panic. Clara knelt beside her immediately. Hey, it's okay. It's just the wind. Sophia shook her head, hands clamped over her ears. Too loud, she whispered, voice hoarse from disuse. The noise that won't stop. Clara froze. It was the first time she'd heard her speak. She touched the girl's hand gently. Then we'll make it stop, okay? Just you and me. Sophia blinked, her breathing slowing. You make the noise go away, she whispered. The words hit Clara harder than any threat could. That night, when the house grew still again, Clara sat by the window of her room, the phone hidden in her drawer. She replayed the recording one more time, listening to Anton's voice plotting theft and betrayal in the same house where a child whispered about noise and shadows. Lucian Serrano had built an empire on control, but his foundation was cracking, and his enemies were sitting at his own table. Clara realized she was living two lives now. By day, the gentle caregiver who helped a little girl learn to breathe again. By night, the silent witness collecting threads of corruption under the nose of a mafia king. Outside, thunder rolled over the horizon, soft but steady. Somewhere in the mansion, a light flicked on. A shadow moved past Sophia's door, pausing for a fraction too long before disappearing. Clara's hand went to the drawer, her thumb brushing the phone's edge. She didn't know what scared her more, what she had discovered, or what might happen when Lucian finally did. The storm broke the next afternoon. Not outside. The skies were clear, but inside the Serrano mansion, where silence shattered like glass. Clara had just finished Sophia's reading lesson when two guards entered the room without knocking. They were polite, but their politeness carried an edge. "Miss Williams," one said, "Mr. Serrano wants to see you." Now, Sophia looked up, eyes wide. Clara forced a reassuring smile. "It's fine, sweetheart. I'll be back before dinner." But she could feel it, the tension, the wrongness in the air, as they led her down the hall toward Lucian's office. The heavy double doors were already open. Lucian stood behind his desk, his jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms. His expression was carved from stone. Across from him, Anton lounged in one of the chairs, too relaxed, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. On the desk lay Clara's phone. Every drop of blood in her body seemed to freeze. Lucian's voice, when it came, was low, controlled. That was always worse than shouting. "Would you like to tell me why my employee found this recording on your device?" Clara stared at the phone, her pulse pounding. What recording?" Anton's smile was small and precise. "The one of me speaking in confidence with our legal counsel. About private Serrano business." "That's not what it was," Clara said quickly. "You were plotting embezzlement." Anton's tone was silk wrapped around poison. "Is that the lie you've built to save yourself?" Lucian's gaze shifted to her, cold and sharp. "Enough. I want truth, Miss Williams. Did you record a conversation that wasn't yours to hear?" Clara's throat felt dry. "Yes, but—" Lucian's voice hardened. "Then you admit you spied." "Not for me," Anton cut in. "The Valades have been trying to infiltrate us for months. Wouldn't surprise me if she's one of theirs." The accusation hit the room like thunder. Lucian's eyes darkened. He stepped closer to her, and Clara could feel the weight of his anger. Not the wild, shouting kind, but the kind that burned slow and quiet, the kind that killed reputations and leveled empires. "You came into my house," he said, each word measured. "You sat beside my daughter. You earned her trust. And now I find you with recordings of my men." "I wasn't spying," she said, forcing her voice to hold steady. "I was protecting her. They're stealing from Sophia's trust, Lucian. From you." The use of his name stopped him for half a second, but only that. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea what happens to people who lie to me?" "I'm not lying." Anton rose, feigning offense. "Boss, we can't let sentiment cloud this. She's compromised." "Enough," Lucian snapped. His voice was quiet again, but the air in the room felt thinner. He turned his gaze back to Clara. There was no softness left in it. "You had one job, to care for my daughter. Instead, you used her as cover to get close to me." The words cut deep, sharper than anything Anton could have said. Clara felt something inside her crack. "If I wanted to destroy you," she said quietly, "I wouldn't have saved your daughter." The line hung in the air like a slap. Even Anton's smirk faltered. For the first time, Lucian hesitated. Something flickered in his expression, doubt, or maybe memory, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He turned away, jaw tight. "You're dismissed from the premises," he said. "Guards will escort you to your room. You'll remain there until further notice." "Sir," Anton said, smoothly regaining his poise, "if she's guilty." Lucian's hand came up, silencing him. "If she's guilty, I'll handle it." Then he looked back at Clara, and for the first time, his anger dimmed just enough to reveal something else beneath it. Hurt. "One night," he said quietly. "You have one night to prove you're not lying to me." Her breath caught. "And if I can't?" Lucian's eyes met hers. "Then you won't see the sunrise from this house again." The guards led her away. As she passed Anton, he gave her a small, triumphant smile. Outside, the corridors seemed darker than usual. The house that had once felt too large now felt like a cage. Back in her room, she sank onto the bed, shaking. On the nightstand sat Sophia's sketchpad, left open from their last drawing session. A child's world of pencil lines, flowers, clouds, the garden gate. But in the corner of the page, half hidden in shadow, Sophia had drawn something new. Two figures, one tall and dark, one smaller, holding a lantern. Clara stared at it, her throat tight. One night, that's all she had to uncover proof that Anton wasn't just lying, but planning something far worse. Somewhere in the house below, she heard the faint hum of security cameras adjusting, the sound of guards changing shifts. She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and whispered to herself, "If this house wants to break me, it picked the wrong girl." Then she stood, turned off the light, and started planning. The house slept, but Clara didn't. Every tick of the clock pressed against her chest like a countdown. She had less than 9 hours left before Lucian Serrano decided whether she lived or disappeared. Outside her window, the gardens gleamed under a full moon. Guards moved along the pathways, their radios crackling softly. Somewhere deeper in the mansion, doors shut, and the great machine of Serrano power settled into its midnight rhythm. She waited until the footsteps in the corridor faded, then moved. Barefoot, heart thundering, she slipped out of her room, Sophia's small flashlight clutched in her hand. The beam was faint, just enough to guide her through the dark hall. Every sound felt amplified, the whisper of her breath, the creak of the floorboards, the soft brush of fabric. Anton's office was on the west wing, 2 floors down, a place she'd only seen from a distance. Getting there meant passing 3 cameras and 1 guard post. But Clara had been paying attention for weeks. She knew when the cameras rotated, when the guards smoked outside the kitchen door, and which passageways the staff avoided. She moved like someone half invisible, her fear sharpened into precision. The office door was locked with a keypad. She'd seen Anton punch in the code once, careless in conversation. For numbers. She'd memorized the rhythm of his fingers. Her pulse stuttered as she entered them. The lock clicked open. Inside, the room smelled of cigar smoke and polished wood. Bookshelves lined the walls, but the desk, massive, black marble, was what drew her attention. She knew what she was looking for. The voice logs Anton mentioned during that intercepted conversation, the proof of his dealings with the Valetti family. She opened drawers, careful not to leave traces. Files, ledgers, receipts, but no drives. Then, as she crouched to check beneath the desk, she saw it. A small silver lockbox hidden under a false panel. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it out. No key. Of course not. She reached for the paper clip she'd tucked into her pocket, a trick from her years working restaurant lockers. It took 2 tries, but the latch finally gave. Inside, a black USB drive gleamed under the moonlight. A small label on it read, VL Recordings 3. Her throat went dry. This was it. She slid the drive into her pocket and turned to leave, just as the doorknob rattled. Her heart seized. Footsteps. Low voices. 2 men. She looked around wildly. No closets. No time. The only escape was the tall set of curtains behind the desk. She slipped behind them, pressing herself flat against the wall as the door swung open. Anton wants us to double-check his files before the morning meeting, one guard muttered. He doesn't trust the new accountant. Please don't turn on the light. A click. Bright white light flooded the room. Through a thin gap in the curtain, she saw one of the guards walk to the desk, flipping through papers. The other leaned against the wall, yawning. This guy hoards everything, the first grumbled. Half this stuff doesn't even make sense. It doesn't have to, the second replied. He's a Serrano. We don't question, we just protect. Minutes crawled by. Clara's hands shook, her lungs begging for air. Sweat trickled down her spine. Then, finally, the guard started toward the door. You think the boss really suspects her? One asked. The waitress? Doesn't matter. Anton says she's dirty. She's dirty. The door closed behind them. Clara waited 5 full seconds before moving. When she finally slipped out, her legs felt numb. She locked the door behind her, then ran. By the time she reached her room, dawn was creeping in, the sky bruised with gray. Her hands shook as she powered on her laptop. The drive loaded instantly. Dozens of audio files appeared, timestamps, locations, initials. She clicked the most recent one. Anton's voice, clear and smug. Once Serrano's distracted by that girl, we'll route the funds through Valetti's offshore account. When the deal closes, Serrano will be finished. I'll inherit everything. His name, his empire, his silence. Another voice, a Valetti enforcer, replied. And the kid? Collateral. He won't risk his daughter. He never does. Clara covered her mouth. Rage and disbelief tangled in her chest. She copied the files to her laptop, then to a second flash drive for backup. At exactly 6:45, she walked down the hall toward Lucian's study. 2 guards followed but didn't stop her. Maybe they'd been told to bring her anyway. Lucian was waiting behind his desk, the same unreadable calm etched into his face. Anton stood nearby, arms crossed, his expression smug. Clara didn't speak. She simply placed the USB drive on the desk and pushed it toward Lucian. "Play it," she said. Lucian arched a brow but inserted the drive into his computer. For a long moment, the only sound was static, and then Anton's voice filled the room. Every word, every betrayal, every deal with the Valettis. Anton's smirk vanished. His color drained. Lucian didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen, face carved in ice. When the recording ended, the silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, he looked up, first at Anton, then at Clara. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Leave us," he told the guards. When the door shut, he exhaled slowly, a sound that carried both fury and fatigue. He looked at Clara again. "You risked your life for this." "I told you the truth," she said quietly. Lucian's gaze softened, just barely. "And now everyone else will hear it." He turned to Anton. "Call the board. Tonight." Anton's eyes widened. "Lucian, wait." But Lucian was already walking toward the door. "No," he said. "I'm done waiting." By the time the Serrano board convened that night, the city skyline outside the tower glowed with the calm of people who had no idea a war was about to break inside 20 floors above them. The conference room at Serrano Holdings was a monument to intimidation. Marble floors, a 12-foot table of black glass, and a wall of windows that turned every man inside into a silhouette against the city lights. Anton Malrek stood at the head of the table, not Lucian. That alone sent a murmur through the room. He looked the part, impeccably dressed, confident, voice oiled with false authority. "Gentlemen," he began smoothly, "before Mr. Serrano arrives, there's an urgent matter of internal concern." He gestured toward the digital screen behind him, where a cascade of financial reports filled the display. "These," he said, "are proof of years of financial misconduct, embezzlement, laundering, and illegal transfers from our subsidiary accounts. The origin." He paused for effect. "Lucian Serrano himself." Gasps rippled across the table. Anton turned, feigning regret. "It gives me no pleasure to bring this forward. But our investors deserve transparency." That was when the double doors opened. Lucian entered, slow and deliberate, Clara a few steps behind him. The room went silent. Even Anton's voice faltered. "Am I interrupting?" Lucian asked, tone calm, but sharp enough to slice through steel. Anton recovered quickly. "Lucian," he said, spreading his hands, "you're just in time. I was about to show the board your signature on these fraudulent transfers." He tapped the screen. Numbers shifted. Lucian's name appeared on digital documents, dates matching offshore movements. Lucian's face remained unreadable. "Impressive fabrication," he murmured. Anton's brows arched. "Fabrication? You think I'd stand here with empty accusations?" "Empty men often fill silence with noise," Lucian said. "And you've made quite a lot of it lately." The insult landed softly, but the chill behind it silenced even the board members. Anton stepped forward, pressing his advantage. "You think fear still works here? You're losing control. Your empire's crumbling because you're distracted by weakness, by sentiment. I'm saving Serrano Holdings from you." He turned toward the others, voice rising. "This company was built on order, not pity. And yet, this man brought an outsider into our home, an infiltrator who spied on us." His finger jabbed toward Clara. Ask her who she really works for. The boardroom erupted with murmurs. Clara stepped forward before Lucian could speak. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. If you want the truth, listen to this. She placed a small speaker on the table and hit play. Anton's own voice filled the room, crisp and unmistakable. Once Serrano's distracted by that girl, we'll route the funds through Valetti's offshore account. When the deal closes, Serrano will be finished. I'll inherit everything. His name, his empire, his silence. Gasps turned into silence, the kind that held weight. Anton's color drained. That's edited, he stammered. Clara met his eyes. There's a timestamp. Check it. Lucian leaned forward, resting both hands on the table. She's right. I verified the recording myself. He straightened, his shadow long across the glass table. Anton, you wanted to destroy me with lies. He stepped closer, voice dropping into a low, lethal calm. So I'll bury you with truth. Every word struck like a hammer. Anton lunged toward the laptop, desperate. She planted that. You can't prove. Lucian's security chief, Elias Vance, stepped from the doorway, 2 men behind him. Oh, we can, Elias said, holding up a printed dossier. Bank transfers, offshore ledgers, all in your name. The valet has confirmed your contact just this morning. Anton froze. For the first time, the mask cracked completely. Panic flickered in his eyes. Lucian, please. Lucian's gaze didn't waver. You didn't just betray me. You stole from my daughter. From the last piece of my family that's innocent. He turned to the guards. Take him. Anton's voice broke into frantic pleading as they seized him. Lucian, I did it for us. For the business. Lucian didn't respond. He just watched as Anton was dragged from the room, past the glass walls, down the hallway, swallowed by security and silence. When the doors shut again, he turned back to the stunned board. Let the record show, he said, voice steady. Anton Malrek is no longer affiliated with Serrano Holdings. His shares will be seized under breach of contract and criminal conspiracy. No one spoke. No one dared. Clara stood quietly at the edge of the room, watching the man who'd once terrified her command his empire again, not with violence, but with truth. Lucian looked at her, something unspoken passing between them. For the first time, his eyes held not suspicion, but respect, maybe even gratitude. He faced the board again. This company will not be ruled by fear, he said. Not anymore. Then he turned, walked out, and the doors closed behind him with the soft finality of a gavel strike. In that moment, the legend of Lucian Serrano changed, from the man who ruled through power to the man who reclaimed it through justice. And beside him, walking into the night's cool silence, was the woman who had taught him how. The Serrano mansion was quiet again. Not the brittle, heavy quiet of fear, but something new, something fragile and real. Rain had passed through the night, leaving the world washed clean. The gardens below glistened under a pale dawn, and the first light stretched through Sophia's bedroom window, painting everything gold. Clara sat by the bedside, brushing a few strands of hair from the little girl's face. Sophia was asleep, breathing softly, her small hand still curled around Clara's scarf. It was the first full night of rest she'd had since Clara arrived. Lucian stood by the doorway, watching in silence. No suit tonight, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his tie hanging loose around his neck. For once, he looked less like a man who ruled an empire and more like a father who didn't know how to start over. She didn't wake up screaming, Clara whispered, still watching Sophia. Lucian's voice was low. She hasn't slept this peacefully in almost a year. He walked closer, stopping beside the bed. His hand brushed Sophia's hair, gentle, reverent. Every night, she used to cry for her mother, he said quietly. Then one day she stopped. I thought it meant she was healing. I was wrong. Clara looked up. She stopped because she didn't think anyone was listening. Lucian's eyes flicked toward her, dark and tired, but softer than before. And now she believes someone is. They stood in silence, listening to the rhythm of Sophia's breathing. Outside, the first birds began to sing, a sound that felt almost out of place in the house that had seen so much deceit. After a moment, Lucian spoke again. When Anton came to me years ago, I thought loyalty was something you could command. That fear was stronger than respect. He glanced toward the window, his reflection fractured by the morning light. I built everything on that belief. Fear, control, silence. But in the end, it nearly destroyed everything I had left. Clara didn't interrupt. She knew he wasn't talking to her alone. He was confessing to the ghosts that haunted his empire. He turned to her then. You walked into my world without knowing what it was. And you did what no one here dared to do. You told me the truth, even when it could have killed you. She shook her head slightly. You didn't need me to fix it, Lucian. You just needed someone to remind you it could still be fixed. A small, weary smile touched his mouth. You sound like someone who believes in redemption. I think people confuse redemption with forgiveness, she said. Forgiveness is a gift. Redemption's a choice. He studied her for a moment, as if trying to memorize the simplicity of what she'd just said. Then his gaze shifted back to Sophia. When her mother died, he said softly, I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt us again. But I see now, distance can hurt worse than any enemy ever could. He straightened, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve, that old reflex of control flickering briefly before fading. Tomorrow, I'll announce Anton's removal publicly. His accounts, his shares, all gone. Serrano Holdings will be rebuilt from the ground up. Transparent. Accountable. Clara arched a brow. A Mafia boss talking about accountability? That earned a low laugh. Quiet, genuine, unexpected. Careful, Clara Williams. You're the only person who could say that to my face and still be standing. Maybe that's why you keep me around, she teased lightly. Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe because my daughter won't let you leave. As if on cue, Sophia stirred, her small hand tightening around Clara's scarf. Lucian froze mid-step, watching. A hint of emotion passed through his eyes, something close to gratitude, something deeper than words. She trusts you, he said. Clara smiled faintly. She'll trust you again, too. Lucian looked at her then, not as a boss, not even as the man the world feared, but as a father, and perhaps, for the first time in years, as a man trying to be better. He nodded slowly. Then maybe there's hope for both of us. They stood together in the soft hush of dawn, the light growing stronger, filling the room with warmth. Sophia shifted again, her breathing steady and peaceful. Clara turned toward the window. The same golden glow that had fallen on her the morning Lucian first came to her door now bathed them all. The waitress, the Mafia boss, and the child who had unknowingly brought them together. Funny, she said softly, almost to herself. The light always finds a way in even here. Lucian followed her gaze, his voice quiet but certain. Then let's make sure it stays. Outside, the sun broke fully over the horizon, its rays spilling across the marble floors of the Serrano mansion. The house that had once been ruled by fear now breathed in something different: truth, compassion, and the fragile beginning of peace. For the first time, Lucian Serrano wasn't rebuilding an empire. He was rebuilding a life. You've been watching Mafia Soul, where power has a heartbeat and every choice carries a cost. If you believe even the darkest souls can find their light, hit subscribe and step deeper into the world of Mafia Soul, where power meets conscience. And love is the most dangerous deal of all. These stories are born in the shadows and told with the heart. See you in the next video.